Okay, this is another tutorial on how to use Premiere Pro, and this one we'll be looking at how to work with multiple clips from the same shoot and also doing color correction and color matching between cameras. Just a few little things. Okay, here we go. So here we are in Premiere Pro, and let's start with just one thing that we can do, which is we can, whenever we're making a new sequence, right? So this is a timeline, but the whole thing is called a sequence. You can have multiple sequences open, so multiple different versions of the same material. So I can always go over to my media browser over here and the library area, and I can right click on that and scroll on a clip that I want to use, and I can scroll down and I can make a new sequence from that clip. So for example, in this case, I know that this is going to be what's called the master clip or the master track for what I'm about to do, which is to overlay a second camera from the same shoot on top and then do a little bit of cutting together. So I just made a new clip. You can see that it's the name of the clip. I made a new sequence. It's the name of the clip. And I can rename that. Sorry, I have to rename it over here. So here's that sequence. And I'm going to rename it sample sequence. Brilliant. Okay, so now I'm going to come over and grab another shot from that same shoot. This is for M. Jacobson. Thank you, M, for unbeknownst to you, volunteering to allow me to do this work with your material today. So now I have this other shot of the same material sitting on top of that previous master shot. So now what I need to do is match them together in time. So what I'm going to do is just put my playhead in here somewhere, and then I'm going to double click this top clip and go to Effect Controls, and we know that we have motion, opacity, different things that we can affect. We're going to go to Opacity, click on the numbers, and then scroll them to the left. Okay, so I can see pretty clearly that these are not lined up. So what do I do? Well, the simplest thing I can do is look for a spot with what I would call a percussive movement, something really clear that I can focus on. Now I've already found something, this little envelope-ish moment where she comes to passe. Yeah. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find that in the master track, and then I'm going to align it. And I'm just resizing my timeline. I'm going to align it with the top track. Now I've already set up this clip so it has what's called a marker in it, so that I can do that quickly, but you would just slide back and forth until you found that relationship. Now I can see that this is a tiny bit off, and there, that should be right. Yeah, okay. So again, basically that process, you put the clip on top, you change the opacity, you find some percussive moment like a fall or some quick action where you can see in both shots the movement so that you can line them up. Then you can leave the opacity that way or not. It's up to you. But in this case, what we're going to do is I'm just going to come over here to the beginning, and I'm just going to cut away, so to speak. Okay, so I want to look at both shots. I know from this shoot that this master track, it was shot with a different lens. Obviously, I guess that's obvious, but It's an older lens, and that lens has a kind of a warm tone. So you can see that the colors in this, it has this kind of pinkish warm tone versus the top image, which has, whoops, I'm in the wrong. Yep, so I'm going to scroll that back over. It's much cooler, kind of more natural looking. Yeah, so again, seeing the difference. So this brings up the question of what's called color correction. And to do that, we need to go to our Effects tab at the top, or Effects View. So when I click on that, it brings up this panel on the right, the Effects panel. And I'm going to go down to Video Effects, and then I'm going to scroll down to Color Correction and open that. And then I'm going to go down to, where are you? Lumetri Color. This is the most effective effect. That's really funny. It's the best one for color correction, just light and color, making changes. So I'm going to drag that and drop it onto that top clip, and I'm going to drag it and drop it onto the bottom clip. And why did I do both? I know that I need to change the bottom. For me, I need to change the bottom one to match the top. But I also think the top one could be a little bit, a little warmer, a little more saturated. So I'm going to start with that one because that's the one I'm trying to head towards. So I'm going to double click that to open it, come up to my viewer window and go to Effect Controls. Okay, so I'm not going to be working on motion or any of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to close that up so I don't have to keep looking at it. Well, I might leave opacity open, but okay. So now basic correction. Has lots of different things that you can do. Let me go ahead and move this over a little bit so you can see a little bit more of those words. So for example, I can change the color temperature to make it cooler or warmer. And I do want it to be a tiny bit warmer-ish. And tint is, like if I wanted to match the bottom one, I might use tint a little bit because it does look a little tinted, but I don't. I'll go the other direction, so I'm going to leave that alone. Exposure, this is exposed pretty nicely actually. I might dial this down just a tiny bit. Let's see, well, it's not scrolling. There we go, whoops. Right about there. Yeah. And contrast, it's got plenty of contrast to me. I could dial down the highlights, but I think it's all right. Shadows, whites, yeah, everything looks all right. Okay, so then I'm going to come down here to saturation. I'm going to bring up the saturation a little bit. That's looking a little bit better to me. If you open up the creative, there are other options. If you have something that's a little bit blurry or it's a soft lens, like it doesn't look totally sharp, you can use a little sharpening to kind of bring that back. You can use vibrance, kind of adds, it's mostly towards skin color. I'm going to actually bring that up a little bit. There we go. Yeah, okay, looking good. There's other things. You can use these color wheels if you want to learn how to do that. I can make another tutorial, so it gets a little, not super complicated, but more than we need to do right now. Okay, so I can turn that off and on. Yeah, I think that's better. I'd probably keep tweaking it, but for the purposes of right now. Okay, so now that is what I'm going towards. So now I want to work on this bottom clip. Whoops, I didn't need to double click. Could have just clicked on it. Okay, so motion, which color. So basic correction. So I'm going to take the temperature and take that over a little bit, just a little bit. That's maybe too much. Okay, there. And exposure, I think exposure is probably okay. Bring the whites down a little bit, just to flatten it a little bit. Exposure might want to come up then. So all of this is kind of to your eye. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So maybe we'll have to work on the color wheel a little bit. So let's take a look at that. So we're going to go back down to creative. And I'm going to, so these two wheels, yeah, looks like we're going there. So these two wheels, because the shadows are kind of purplish in this one, so if I click, it's going to change the color of the shadows in the clip. And already that's looking, that's actually pretty close. Not too bad. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so same thing with highlights. I'm going to go a little bit warmer with the highlights. Woo, too warm. So anywhere I click is going to have an effect. Yeah, okay. That's, I think for our purposes right now, she now looks like she's pretty much in the same world. Yeah, cool. All right, so in terms of color and light, that Lumetri color effect is your best choice because it has all these different options and controls. So you can get way more creative, particularly if you're working on dance film stuff. So yeah, definitely things to play around with, and when we get to dance film, we'll start looking at that more thoroughly. Okay, so I'm just going to come back in here. It looks like I accidentally made some keyframe animation of opacity, so I'm going to take those out. And if you don't know about that, check the video about working with 4K clips.